Incredible discovery. Billionaire exposed to touching truth behind his maid's surprising Garde. Thomas Blake stood tall in the boardroom of his San Francisco skyscraper, his crisp suit a testament to the wealth he commanded. Yet, as the accolades washed over him, an unsettling void gnawed at his insides. The clamor of high finance no longer thrilled him. Instead, it served as a constant backdrop to his loneliness. He had convinced himself that accolades could replace genuine connection, but they left a bitter aftertaste. He leaned back, gripping the steel chair tightly, his mind wandering to Emma, the daughter he hadn't spoken to in 2 years. They had drifted apart after she left for college, the space between them filled with silence and unaddressed hurt. With every promotion, every financial breakthrough, the echo of her absence grew louder. His phone buzzed, jolting him back to the room. It was an unremarkable yet timely reminder of his assistant's latest tasks, a checklist that felt more like a prison sentence than a source of purpose. He looked around the boardroom, a blur of eager faces and manicured smiles. The emptiness thudded in his chest. As he left the building, the sunlight felt harsh against his skin. He pushed through the hustle of city streets towards his sprawling penthouse. Each step was a reminder of his vast fortune, yet all he could think about was the hollow space that occupied his life. That evening at dinner, he noticed Maria, his maid, clearing the table. How long had she been with him? Years? It was a curious question, one he couldn't recall asking. Her son Mateo's laughter echoed from the living room, a stark contrast to the silence of his own existence. He hadn't quite understood her presence in his life until now, struggling to see past the layers of her routines. Maria, a hard-working mother from across town, had quietly brought warmth to his cold world. Tension curled tighter in his gut as he replayed conversations muffled in formality. Then came the health scare, a sudden jolt of pain in his chest that landed him in the sterile hospital room. In the cacophony of hospital sounds, he found Maria's talent revealed. A collection of her paintings hung on the wall. His brows furrowed as he focused on the colors, vivid strokes telling stories of struggle adorned with hope. They mirrored his own pain, unrecognizable amidst suit jackets and glossy boardroom pitches. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Each piece resonated. They stripped away the polished veneer of his life. Confusion swirled with fear. Could he reach across the chasm of his privilege to support her dreams without losing himself in the process? He envisioned an art show, a way to showcase her work. But what if his motives were misunderstood? Whispers of ulterior motives lingered like dark clouds. Thomas felt the walls closing in, burdened with the weight of his own privilege. The glimmer of hope began to twist into anxiety, knotting within him a desperate need for redemption. Just as he started to game out a plan, a text from Emma pinged on his phone. She was coming home soon. The urgency crashed into him like a tidal wave, forcing him to confront the precarious balance of his life. Should he invest in Maria's future or take a step toward mending his fractured bond with Emma? The air thickened as Thomas stood frozen, clenching the phone tightly, heart pounding wild with the uncertainty of his choices. The weight of Thomas's indecision loomed over him like a gathering storm. He knew he was at a crossroads, the kind that lay bare the true nature of his character. The countless accolades and wealth had clouded his sense of purpose for too long. Now, confronted with both Emma's impending arrival and Maria's artistic aspirations, he felt the urgency of accountability pressing against his chest. His mind raced as he paced the expansive floor of the penthouse, each step echoing the dissonance in his heart. Should he dive headfirst into organizing an art show for Maria and risk Emma's disappointment? Or should he focus on reconnecting with his daughter, crafting a bridge to mend their fractured bond? He couldn't help but remember Emma's words from their last conversation, her disappointment palpable as she had accused him of prioritizing work over family. Could he truly balance two worlds so starkly divided? He settled onto the sleek couch, staring at the wall, where Maria's paintings hung in his mind's eye. They overflowed with emotion, each brushstroke a testament to stories he had never taken the time to understand. Did he possess the same resilience as Maria? Could he transform his void into an opportunity for connection and growth? That night, sleep eluded him, his mind twisted with the possibilities. As dawn broke, illuminating his penthouse with a soft glow, clarity pierced through the fog. He would reach out to both Emma and Maria, recognizing that genuine connection meant being present in both realms. First, he would write to Emma, an apology, noting how much her absence had affected him. "No more excuses," he whispered, already envisioning the words on paper. Once their communication was initiated, he would turn to Maria. The idea of an art show morphed from anxiety into possibility, a platform to honor her talent while sharing his own journey of redemption. Thomas poured himself a rich cup of coffee, the bitter aroma grounding him as he picked up his laptop. His hands hovered above the keyboard, hesitating as he contemplated the vulnerability of his words. The prospect of vulnerability twisted his gut, but he pressed forward, detailing not just regrets, but aspirations to evolve. Emma needed to see the man he aspired to become, not just the hollow vessel cloaked in success. After sending the email, he felt a modicum of relief wash over him, but it was fleeting. The enormity of his next move loomed larger. Thoughts of Maria consumed him as he drafted a message to her, inviting her to share her paintings with a network he'd painstakingly built over the years. This time, he would offer not just surface-level support, but genuine partnership, a mentorship he had missed in his own life. Would she understand his intentions? Would she trust him, a man who had been nothing but a shadowy figure in her life until now? The native tension within him flared, nearly prompting him to abandon the idea. Could he genuinely emerge as an ally, or would he simply reinforce the divides he sought to close? With newfound determination, he picked up his phone and dialed Maria's number. As the ringing echoed in his ear, the weight of uncertainty washed over him again, but this time filled with purpose. "Maybe the first step is simply showing up," he murmured. There was no backing down now. The weight on his chest hadn't vanished, but it had shifted, a palpable tension infused with possibility and anxiety. The fading pulse of loneliness began nudging against a rising tide of hope. The call connected, and as Maria answered, Thomas felt a jolt of anticipation. Perhaps this was just the beginning of a new conversation, one that could lead him not only towards healing his relationship with Emma, but into a partnership with Maria that could redefine both their paths. "Maria, can we talk? I have an idea." Little did he know, the words that would follow would ripple through both their lives in unexpected ways, testing them as they ventured into uncharted territories of hope, vulnerability, and self-discovery. Thomas held his breath as he listened to the softness in Maria's voice. The initial tension of their past washed over him like a wave, but he stood firm, ready to embrace the confrontation that awaited. "What's your idea?" she asked, teasing out the breadcrumbs of his intentions. "An art show," he began, allowing the words to unfold one by one, each syllable wrapped in a breath of meaning. "I want to help you showcase your work. It's time people recognized your talent." The admission felt risky, exposing the vulnerability he'd shielded for so long, but also electrifying. Silence hung on the line, thick and palpable. Thomas could almost hear the gears turning in her mind. None of this had been expected,
least of all from the man who had remained a distant figure in her life. But Maria's response was immediate and frank, piercing through his hopes like a sharpened blade. "Why now, Thomas? You've never cared."
Before. Her skepticism was justified. He had given her every reason to doubt him, to suspect hidden motives beneath his sudden enthusiasm. Thomas squared his shoulders, grappling with his own doubts. "I know I've made mistakes," he confessed, his heart racing with the need for honesty. "But I want to make amends. This isn't just about your art. It's about me understanding your world." "Understanding my world?" she scoffed, righteous anger lacing her tone. "You're a billionaire, Thomas. Your world is far from mine." There was no sugarcoating it. He could practically see her brow furrowed in disbelief. "What do you know about struggle, about sacrifice? You sit in your ivory tower, pretending to care." Those convictive words hung heavy, sending shockwaves through him. She was right. His life, lined with privilege and comfort, seemed worlds apart from the stark realities she'd faced. Had he assumed that a mere gesture could bridge that chasm? But in her heat, Thomas could sense a spark of something else, a yearning for recognition. "Maria," he interrupted gently, "I can't change the past, but I can change the future. Help me understand, please." There it was, the genuineness in his plea, raw and unrefined, slowly stemming the tide of her fury. "You really want to help?" she asked, her voice softening. "Yes, I want to know your story, the inspiration behind your art. I want to value not just the final piece, but the hours of dedication that precede it." The moment felt pivotal, a turning point, compacted within the confines of their conversation. Gradually, resistance ebbed from her voice. "Okay, but you need to understand. This is my life. I'm not just some savant to showcase for your benefit. This is personal." He sensed her resolve, tempered with caution, making it clear that if they were to progress, he would have to earn her trust. "Then let's start there," he asserted. "What do you need to make this happen? I want to support you, truly, authentically, no strings attached." There was silence once more, but it was the promising lull that followed after a storm. Maria took a steadying breath. "I need to show you what drives me, the struggles, the victories, the raw truth behind each painting. If we're going to do this, it has to be real." "Real is what I want," Thomas replied, his pulse quickening at the realization that he was ready to confront his own limitations and prejudices. This was perhaps the most daunting venture he'd ever undertaken, not about gallery spaces or applause, but about uncovering emotional truths. In those tentative terms, they began sketching something wholly new, something less about art as an object of beauty, and more about the narratives woven within its medium. As they parted ways that evening, Thomas felt a specter of hope rising within. But beneath this burgeoning partnership was another question wrestling for space in his mind. Could he demonstrate to Emma that he was capable of genuine relationships, not just with her and Maria, but within the broader tapestry of his life? The moment of truth was approaching. The dual journey of reconciliation and redemption was only just beginning. If he was to redefine himself, he would need to act rather than merely hope. "Will I have the courage?" he whispered to himself, fully aware that the coming days could shake the very foundation of who he believed himself to be. And somewhere in the waking world, a vital choice loomed just ahead. Would he truly face the profound truths lurking beneath his comfortable existence? The thought echoed within him, galvanizing newfound determination. As the night descended, Thomas felt the weight of possibility bearing down on him. Tomorrow held promises yet unspoken, paths yet to be carved out from the uncertainty he'd lived for so long. What might be uncovered in that exploration remained shrouded in mystery. One thing was clear: he was no longer standing still. He was embarking on a journey filled with brushes of redemption and rebirth. Thomas woke with a weight pressing down on his chest, a reminder of the conversation he had shared with Maria. Today was necessary. It was the day he would step beyond all that he had known and take meaningful action. The faint glow of dawn crept through the heavy curtains of his loft, illuminating the myriad of artwork that adorned the walls, each piece a silent witness to his decisions. As he dressed, his mind buzzed with possibilities. Would Maria be receptive? What if she still doubted him? As these thoughts swirled, he wrestled between self-doubt and a burgeoning excitement, recognizing that the path forward wouldn't be easy, nor without confrontation, either with her or, more painfully, himself. His phone buzzed, shattering the morning stillness. It was Maria, a single sentence on the screen that sent a ripple of anticipation through him. "Let's meet at the studio." Those words ignited a mix of hope and trepidation within Thomas. He agreed without a hint of hesitation, but the insistent voice in the back of his mind questioned whether he was really prepared for what lay ahead. Arrival at her studio wasn't just a physical journey. It was an emotional leap into unknown territory. The old warehouse smelled of paint, turpentine, and something indefinable, perhaps dreams. Each blank canvas peered at him, waiting for a story, a soul. He felt a swell of inadequacy pushing against his ambition. How could he help her tell those stories if he struggled to understand his own? Maria was already there, standing in front of a massive canvas splattered with vibrant blues and stark whites. The sight of her amidst her creations sparked something within him. As he approached, he steeled himself against the defensive air that she often radiated, knowing that today was not about arguments, but connection. "Thanks for coming," she said, her posture taut but her voice softer than before. "I appreciate the opportunity to be here," Thomas replied genuinely. "I'm eager to understand your work." "Understanding drives the art," Maria began, eyes flickering towards her painting, her expression a mix of pride and vulnerability. "Each brushstroke holds a story of struggle. Every color represents a part of me, the chaos of life, the beauty and the sadness." As she spoke, Thomas noticed the almost religious reverence with which she treated her craft. He too felt a kind of reverence, an admiration for the unfiltered expression of humanity she displayed. "Can you show me how it all connects?" he asked. Maria hesitated, the tension in her shoulders returning. "You need to appreciate the rawness behind it, and that requires learning about me. It's not pretty." "I'm ready for it," Thomas said, the strength of his words granting him a newfound confidence. They sat together in silence for a moment. The world outside faded into a distant thrum, and in that hush something fundamental shifted within him. Her first revelation unfolded, a childhood marked by instability and a relentless struggle for authenticity amid chaos. The narrative poured from her, flourished into the room like the colors she wielded. He listened intently, peeling back layers of her life like the paint on her palette, revealing the vulnerability he had never seen before. "That's how I paint," she said, wiping at her eyes as she spoke of loss and resilience. "It's not just about beauty, it's about carving truth from pain." The weight of her honesty pressed on him. Here was a profound contrast, the luxurious life he'd known versus Maria's raw resilience. He was struck by the realization that he'd navigated his world armored in privilege, seldom looking beyond his own encounters with hardship. "Your journey is remarkable," he responded, daunted by the depth of her experiences. "It deserves to be known." But within Thomas stirred the leftover discomfort. Guilt began to chew at him, the fear of exposing how little he truly knew of life outside his privilege. The challenge of authenticity scared him. Would he be able to champion her work without falling back into the shadows of his golden cage? "Sharing this story isn't easy," Maria remarked, catching the hesitation in his eyes. "It demands vulnerability, and it's easier to stay silent." In that moment, both were confronted with an unspoken truth. He wanted to understand her, but feared embarking on a journey that might shake the very core of his identity. Emerging from his comfort zone could upend everything he had built. Just then, there came a knock on the door, fracturing the charged atmosphere. As she opened it, a shadow loomed behind her, abruptly marking the entry of someone or something that could threaten the delicate progress they'd made. "Who do you think you are, meddling with my work?" The voice dripped with contempt, cutting through the warmth of their connection. In that unsettling moment, Thomas realized he was standing at a crossroads. Would he hide behind his privilege once again, or rise to the challenge and face the confrontation head-on? The air grew heavy.
The comfort of the morning fading to a distant memory. In this clandestine world of resilience and truth, Thomas understood that the real test was not just to support Maria's art, but to confront his own inadequacies as well. Would he find the courage to stand firm? The time had come to face the ramifications of his past actions. Thomas felt the chill of the intruder's voice snake into the room, wrapping around every quiet hope they had begun to build. The tension escalated, a tangible wall between past mistakes and a newfound urgency for growth. His instincts screamed for retreat, to blend back into the background where he'd felt safe for so long. But another part of him urged him to break free from the chains of inaction. "Who are you?" Maria's voice trembled slightly, but held a fortitude that surprised him. She stood firm, her back straight, as if her art itself fortified her presence. "Eric," the figure stepped in, his casual demeanor clashing with the hostility in his tone. "Maria's employer. I can't believe you're here, meddling with something you don't understand." Eric's condescension was palpable, piercing a raw nerve in Thomas. It was a reminder of the societal gulf, the chasm between privilege and the grit of reality Maria embodied. Did Eric feel the weight of his words? Did he know they signaled more than just a protection of what he considered to be his property? "Eric, this is important to me," Maria asserted, her voice steady, yet a hint of vulnerability sharpened the edges of her resolve. "This is about my work, my story. It's not yours to control." Thomas watched the exchange, each back and forth exposing the fragility fostered by years of oppression condensed into this one moment. Within him, doubt wrestled with a flicker of strength. Perhaps it was time for him to speak up, to justify standing there as more than just an observer. "Why are you afraid of her story?" Thomas asked, surprising himself with the strength behind his words. The question hung in the air, a challenge steeped in the collective histories they shared. Eric's expression shifted momentarily, confusion flickering across his face before hardened resolve took over. "It's a burden she wouldn't understand. This is a business, and people in this world don't care for the messy, emotional truths. They want perfection. You can't paint your authenticity into their lives. It's impractical." "Is that what you think her art is? Just a commodity?" Thomas's incredulity surged, fueled by a sense of injustice that seemed to rise from the center of his being. "Her story will resonate with others. It's real. You just want to shove it into a frame without understanding its soul." The attention shifted to him, a palpable tension surfacing as silence enveloped the space. He couldn't let fear dictate his next move. Eric's dismissal still stung, yet a creeping resolve started to replace the heaviness in Thomas's chest. "And who are you, really?"
chuckled bitterly. "Just another man pretending he knows struggle because he listens to her woes? No,
Thomas replied, grounding himself in the conviction that had prickled under his skin since this conversation began. "I may not know her pain, but I am willing to learn. I want to stand beside her rather than above her, to support her journey and help carve out space for her story, and I won't let you silence that." Eric looked momentarily taken aback, the bluster bleeding from his demeanor as he gauged Thomas's seriousness. The boldness Thomas felt now surprised him, awakening parts of himself he had long muted under gilded privilege. Yet, as moments passed, uncertainty began to rear its head again. What lay ahead? Would the confrontation push Maria away rather than uniting them? He yearned to keep the connection flourishing, yet part of him felt as though he were standing on a crumbling precipice, one careless step away from disaster. "I see who you really are, Thomas," Eric said finally, lifting his chin condescendingly. "Just an opportunist looking for a narrative. But let's see how far your little hero act gets you." With that, Eric stepped back, throwing them both a final, disdainful glare before exiting the studio. The door thudded closed, leaving behind an eerie silence that flooded the room. Thomas turned to Maria, scanning her face for signs of reassurance, but found only questions reflected in her eyes. Had he crossed a line, taken too much on himself? Or had he stood up for something true? It was a precarious space to navigate, doubling down on his commitment to help her while wrestling with the fear of stumbling. "I didn't realize," she began, her voice trembling, "that you would feel so strongly about it." The air crackled with tension. This first confrontation had unveiled layers of uncertainty, but it was only the beginning. The truth was raw, still ahead of them and waiting to be discovered. "What are we doing?" she asked, a hint of vulnerability exposed in her tone. "Are you really ready for this?" Though he was shrouded in uncertainty and doubt, a flicker of determination surged through him. "We're working together, and I'm ready to face whatever comes next." But as he said those words, the specter of Eric's looming threat gnawed at him, a reminder of the risks they'd just encountered. The real battle had started, and it wouldn't stop until the truth found its voice. Before he could say more, Maria moved toward her canvas. The longing for expression radiated from her every fiber. Her raw energy was an invitation that Thomas couldn't resist. But as they approached the next step in their collaboration, a thought echoed within him. Was he truly prepared to deal with the consequences of digging deeper into the stories they both harbored? The path of transformation was not merely about aiding Maria. It was about bracing himself for a revelation that could change everything he knew about himself and his privilege. Would he emerge as an ally, or be myopic to the struggles layered within their journey? It was time for his reflection to unveil the truth he dodged for so long. Would he unearth the courage needed to confront that which had been hidden deep within? Thomas felt a knot tighten in his chest as he watched Maria dip her brush into the vibrant colors on her palette, the strokes on her canvas becoming bolder with each moment. The silence in the room was thick, pulsing with the weight of their unvoiced tensions. Every part of him wanted to retreat, to leave the artistic battlefield where vulnerability and fear collided. Yet something deeper, an impulse he had rarely indulged, compelled him to stay. "Are you okay?" he finally ventured, breaking the fragile stillness. It felt inadequate, but the tremor in Maria's hands suggested a tempest inside her. "I will be," she replied, glancing at him with those haunting eyes, filled with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "I just never expected you to stand up like that against Eric." Her words stung, hinting at layers of care he hadn't recognized. Was she accustomed to people retreating instead of supporting her? Doubts infiltrated his thoughts, twisting the knots in his chest tighter. In his upbringing, loyalty often meant silence, an unspoken understanding that confronting difficult truths could lead to unwanted chaos. No one had prepared him for this. I had to. I couldn't let him dismiss what you're trying to create, he said, attempting to muster conviction, the words feeling alien yet liberating as they left his lips. Your story matters. But why? You barely know me. Her eyes searched his for authenticity, a palpable challenge that urged him to dig deeper within. She imprinted a flick of paint onto the canvas in a sweeping arc. It had the wildness of a heart laid bare, yet every swipe reflected years of hardship and resilience. He wanted to feel the same freedom, to communicate his thoughts and emotions without the fear of misunderstanding. Because I want to understand, he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. I want to get past what I think I know and really learn what you feel, what you've gone through. I'm tired of hiding behind privilege when I see so much more. Maria paused, scrutinizing his face for honesty, the turbulence of emotions flickering behind her gaze. She lowered her brush, her breath hitching for a moment as if weighing the implications of his desire to learn. Is it that simple for you? She asked, her tone equal parts incredulous and curious. Are you ready to break the protective shell yourself? Because understanding means diving into discomfort. It means unearthing stories you might not want to hear. Her words wrapped around him like ivy, both beautiful and suffocating. He thought of his life, the decisions made to maintain the facade of comfort, and the way he lived at a distance from the struggles of those around him, particularly.
I don't know how else to change, he said fiercely, defiance bubbling beneath his polite exterior. If I hide from your truth, I'll remain stagnant. I won't just be an observer anymore. I want to be involved, to challenge myself. Maria stepped closer, narrowing the space between them, as if the physical distance mirrored his emotional gap. What if you discover something you don't want to know about yourself? With each inquiry, Thomas felt layers peeling back, exposing wounds he'd willfully overlooked. Then I guess I will have to confront it. As she tilted her head, he sensed a shift in her demeanor, the uncertainty dimming slightly. Thomas could almost see it, her faith wavering, but still anchored in hope. They were intertwined now, standing at the forefront of an unfamiliar journey that beckoned them deeper into raw truths. "What do you want, Thomas?" she asked, her question draped in a haunting seriousness that unsettled him. With every word he spoke, he felt himself evolving, abandoning the brittle foundations of his previous existence. "I want to help you share your story, not out of obligation, but from a place of genuine connection. I want to support you in showcasing the beauty and reality of what you create." Those words hung between them, daring both of them to take the plunge into the chaos held within their respective truths. Yet doubt loomed, testing the resolve he had so recently cultivated. Would this bond withstand the tumultuous revelations ahead? "We need to work toward that," she finally uttered, certainty threading her voice like a thread through fabric, binding them to a shared purpose. But another thought crept in, a looming shadow of Eric and the power he wielded. Thomas felt an unrest brewing in his gut. If they stood together in this endeavor, they had to understand that his presence would be met with obstacles yet unseen. "I know there will be challenges," he warned, "and Eric won't let this go easily. He feels threatened." "Then we confront it, together," Maria declared, a fierce determination reflecting in her eyes. "We show him he has underestimated us." In that moment, the flicker of inspiration ignited something within Thomas, a fervent desire to embrace a collaboration that transcended their individual struggles. They had come too far to turn back now, yet he couldn't shake the apprehension that their ascent would be riddled with peril. But perhaps that terror would reveal their true strengths, driving them to confront their fears head-on. As they stood before the canvas, side by side, his heart raced with the exhilarating uncertainty of unearthing stories that lay buried beneath layers they had yet to explore. The moment for action had arrived, but in the depths of his mind, a question loomed relentlessly. Were they truly ready to face the truth?
Or would the confrontation with Eric expose fractures too deep to mend? Thomas felt his pulse quicken as he and Maria stood side by side, the weight of uncertainty pressing heavily on
him. Their resolve was palpable, as was the lingering threat of Eric looming over their heads like a dark cloud. The prospect of arousing Eric's wrath sent tendrils of doubt curling through his mind. He had never been one to court conflict, preferring the safety of compliant silence over the risk of backlash. But he could no longer deny the fervor igniting within him, pushing him toward uncomfortable truths. "What do we do first?" Thomas asked, the question hanging in the air thick with possibility. Maria turned to face him, her expression fierce but thoughtful. "We need to start documenting my work, gathering stories, images, and whatever else we need to craft a narrative that Eric can't dismiss." Her vision was clear, and that clarity became a compass for Thomas amidst his swirling thoughts. "Right, but do you have a plan for how to present it? His perception won't shift easily," he countered, worry creeping back into his tone. "The key will be to make it personal," she said, her voice steady. "We need to humanize the art, to make him see it beyond his disdain. If we can show him how wrong he is about who I am and what I create, maybe that will resonate with others too." The concept sat with Thomas, marinating like the colors on her palette. She spoke with such conviction, yet he couldn't help but notice how the shadows cast by doubt still flitted across her features. "I'm with you, but if Eric doesn't care about our stories, if he refuses to hear me out, what then?" There was a momentary silence before Maria replied, her gaze unwavering. "Then we have to be louder, more visible. We put ourselves out there, confront him with our existence. The truth can't be silenced forever." Each word struck a chord, and behind every truth lay a challenge he wasn't sure he could handle. He had spent so long balancing on the edge of other people's expectations, never daring to disrupt the status quo. "What if we fail?" The question slipped out before he could stop himself. "Then we fail together," she responded, her tone matter-of-fact, and not a hint of dismay crossed her face. "But if we don't try, then we condemn ourselves to silence, a fate worse than failure." The call to action resonated deep within him, stirring a resilience he had nearly forgotten. Thomas glanced around the room, its walls now seeming to hold a promise of transformation, of love and bravery churning with energy. In that moment, he recognized the potential etched within Maria's strokes on the canvas, an embodied struggle that begged for release. "I want to stand firm," he declared, the weight of realization settling on his shoulders. "No more sidestepping or merely watching from the sidelines. I won't let fear dictate my actions anymore." As she nodded, the shared commitment forged a bond that felt both blessed and fragile, like glass teetering on the edge. With renewed purpose, Thomas turned back to the canvas, imagining how to weave their stories together, a tapestry that might elicit empathy rather than disdain. The challenge became more than a project, it became a path toward authentic self-discovery. They would not only fight for her artistry, but for the breadth of their narratives. Yet amidst the burgeoning hope, there lay the shadow of Eric, an adversary who viewed narratives as mere tools to manipulate. Thomas knew that this confrontation was inevitable. There would be moments when they would have to face the scorn and ridicule, but perhaps amidst that chaos they could find solidarity. As they began to sketch the outline of their uncharted journey, he could feel a looming reckoning on the horizon. Would their resolve hold true when faced with the brutality of Eric's disdain? Or would the confrontation expose hidden fractures they had yet to recognize? "Let's start right now," Maria suggested, drawing him from his reverie. As they took the first step toward unearthing their stories, a thrilling thought danced through his mind. What would they discover about themselves along the way?
The canvas awaited their strokes, just as the world awaited the truths they were about to reveal. Did they have the strength to confront not just Eric, but the truths they had hidden from themselves? The playful brushstrokes ignited a sense of urgency within him, a door flung open to possibility and transformation. Each stroke bore an emotional weight that danced precariously between creation and confrontation, and as he felt the brush pass through his fingers, he recognized that they stood on the precipice of something monumental. But the question lingered, taunting and tantalizing. Were they truly prepared for the revelations that awaited them in the face of Eric's looming challenge? Thomas dipped the brush into the vibrant blue, letting it unite with the white in a celebratory swirl that mirrored the growing exhilaration within him. As he painted, the layers began to reveal themselves, the diversity of colors, the depth of texture. A multifaceted representation of Maria's artistry and, surreptitiously, of his own emerging identity. With every stroke, the uncertainty that had once paralyzed him ebbed, transforming into a quiet determination. Maria stepped back to assess their evolving masterpiece, her brow furrowed in concentration. These colors, they're more than just paint. Her voice cut through the tranquility of their task, charged with fervor. They reflect our journey, our struggles, and our commitment to be seen. The conflicts we face will only add depth. He absorbed her words, understanding that they were crafting not just a piece of art, but a manifesto of their existence. Right. It's about confronting our fears, showing Eric and everyone else that we matter, Thomas replied, his thoughts sharper, incisive. But doubt flickered at the back of his mind. The looming confrontation with Eric still cast shadows over his resolve. "Do you believe we can really change how he sees us?" he asked, hesitating, seeking a clarity he wasn't sure existed. Maria turned sharply, her gaze intense and unwavering. "We won't change everyone's perception. Eric may never see me for what I am, but we can ensure our truth is out there. I refuse to be dismissed." The resonance of her conviction ignited something deep within him. He was not just an observer in this endeavor. He was a participant, an architect of their collective narrative. Aspiration pulsed through him. Thomas could feel the urgency to define who he was, beyond the timid man shaped by the expectations of others. However, as the canvas came to life before their eyes, he felt a tension tight in his chest. With every vibrant hue, he confronted not only the implications of Eric's disdain, but also the fear that had held him captive for so long. What if he indeed failed to stand firm, if the confrontation resulted in a backlash he could not withstand? He leaned into the rhythm of the painting, each movement becoming a meditative chant that drowned out the trepidation. Maybe it's time to highlight the truth behind our realities, to expose Eric to our humanity, Thomas proposed. "Yes," Maria replied, enthusiasm sparking her voice. "We preserve the honesty of our experiences. If Eric sees the beauty and struggle intertwining in my work, perhaps he'll have no choice but to confront his biases." The more they spoke, the more Thomas felt a growing resolve enveloping him. He was no longer just Maria's ally. He recognized that the act of creation was an act of rebellion against the fear and silence he had accepted for too long. "Let's select the stories that speak to the heart of it all," Thomas asserted, his voice steady with newfound resolve. "We'll be bold with our truths, document everything, the joy, the pain, the moments we have fought to hold on to our voices." As they meticulously pieced their stories together, it struck him like lightning. He was evolving right alongside Maria. The art was revealing hidden facets of himself, the courage he never before acknowledged, the intrinsic worth willing to stand against adversity. Gradually, they stepped away from the canvas, their vision crystallizing. The work had become a tangible representation of what they stood for, and an emblem of the confrontation that lay ahead.
But with clarity came the daunting realization of the battle they would soon face. Eric had never let empathy guide his actions. He was a force that thrived in dismissing vulnerability. What would their creations evoke in him? Would he recoil, or could this be an opening for dialogue? With eyes turned back to the burgeoning artwork, Thomas felt the weight of those questions bear down. Ingredients of hope and fear danced a precarious tango in his mind. The next steps would demand everything he had, testing not just his commitment to Maria, but to his own emerging identity. He inhaled deeply, feeling the canvas pulse with potential. A sense of impending confrontation loomed, but equally the promise of introspection. "Are we ready?" Maria's voice broke through his reverie, though it echoed his own sentiment.
"Ready or not, we'll find out soon enough," he replied, a sense of inevitable reckoning tightening within him. As they shared a determined glance, the canvas stood between them, a gateway into their confrontation with Eric, an emblem of a truth waiting to be unveiled. What awaited them in the space beyond that canvas was unknown, but it simmered with tension, urgency, and promise, setting the stage for a reckoning that neither of them could escape. Thomas stood before the canvas, his heart racing beneath the weight of impending confrontation. The vibrant colors coalesced into images that articulated a truth he had yet to fully grasp within himself. How strange, he thought, that something born from fear and vulnerability could produce such an exuberant representation of his journey. The idea that their artwork could resonate with Eric seemed almost laughable, but then again, Thomas had never been one to shy away from taking risks. "Let's ensure every stroke reflects authenticity," he said, fingers hovering over the paintbrush, contemplating their stories. "This is more than just colors. It's about our identities breaking free. It's a testament to our existence. If Eric won't acknowledge us, we'll make it impossible for him not to." Maria nodded emphatically, her eyes glowing with shared fervor. It was this synergy that empowered Thomas, urging him to transcend his self-imposed limitations. Yet, even amidst their creative eruption, he felt the icy tendrils of doubt encroach on his resolve. The confrontation weighed heavily in his mind, morphing into a mental battleground where his old, timid self clashed with the burgeoning architect of his own narrative. "What if he doesn't react the way we hope?" Thomas pondered aloud, his voice barely above a whisper, revealing the chink in his armor. "What if our bravery is met with derision?" "Then that only affirms the need for this to exist," Maria replied, her tone firm, knitting a bridge over his swirling doubts. "Art has the power to reveal even the darkest corners. We have to create it, Thomas. This is our moment." The prospect of their work being viewed as inadequate or misguided felt like a familiar specter, but internally Thomas wrestled against it. What lay ahead was a reckoning not just with Eric, but also with himself, his self-worth, and his right to take up space in a conversation that mattered. The cycle of self-doubt had to be broken. "Maybe the real confrontation isn't just with Eric," he mused, his mind buzzing with newfound clarity. "The true battle is with the parts of myself that still hesitate to own my own power. It's time to silence that self-doubt once and for all." He picked up the brush once more and began applying layers of paint that echoed his realization. Each stroke felt like a release, an act of defiance against the boundaries he had constructed. As he worked, an unfamiliar strength began to unfurl within him, an invigorating flame that pushed past blind compliance. "I'm going to paint something that represents the raw, intricate journey we both have experienced," he declared, unleashing emotions untamed by fear. "The beauty of resilience, the fight to be seen." He glanced at Maria, who cupped her chin, her concentration reflecting a shared understanding. The air around them shifted, pregnant with the weight of their purpose. They were not merely painting a piece of art, they were crafting a sphere of influence, a catalyst for potential change. With their stories manifesting in colorful strokes, Thomas glimpsed the larger narrative they were building. Each hue began to signify not only struggle, but empowerment, each blend of colors reflecting the complex amalgamation of pain and triumph. That was his emerging identity on the canvas, a blend of everything he had resisted but was now embracing. As they stepped back to assess their burgeoning masterpiece, a twinge of excitement overpowered his doubts. Thomas sensed an irreversible shift within him. "Let's finish strong," he said, determination seeping through his voice. "I want our voices, our truths, to echo beyond this moment. When Eric sees this, I want him to confront the very essence of who we are." It was a promise to himself, and the stakes had never felt higher. This artwork would be their declaration, their battle cry against invisibility. Yet amid this crescendo of self-assuredness, a spark of fear remained. Could he sustain this newfound courage when faced with Eric's skepticism? Would he be able to articulate the depth of his convictions? "Soon enough, we will find out what he truly thinks of us," Thomas admitted, a tightness knotting his stomach, the anticipation gnawing at him. As he returned to the canvas, brushing vibrant green across the landscape of his growing truth, clarity washed over him. What lay beyond this artistic endeavor was an existential revelation. With every stroke, he was becoming more than just what others perceived. He was crafting his own reality. The confrontation approached with a pulse of inevitability. "What will happen when Eric sees our truth?" he whispered softly, the anticipation crackling in the air. But Thomas knew that whatever lay ahead, he had evolved. The canvas, a gateway into his reckoning, now pulsed with energy, ready to reveal not just what they created, but who he was becoming. Thomas took a deep breath, the weight hanging over him finally feeling light enough to bear. The vibrant painting before him was no longer just a project. It became a testament to his evolution, a symbol of growth born out of vulnerability. Together, they had transformed the raw emotions they both carried into something tangible. Each brushstroke a declaration of their commitment to forging ahead despite the looming doubts. As the final touches drew closer, Thomas felt a simmering excitement beneath the tension. They had decided to hold their art unveiling right in the heart of the city, an act of defiance against the indifference that blanketed the elite world he had occupied for too long. The exhibit would reflect not just Maria's struggle or his own, but a
shared narrative that wove their lives together. "Are you ready for this?" Maria asked, her eyes filled with both apprehension and unwavering resolve. "That's the question," he replied, a smile breaking through the facade of anxiety. "But I think we've already faced the hard parts. Now we just need to show them the truth." The night of the exhibition arrived, dressed in anticipation and a touch of fear. Crowds mingled within the gallery, whispers weaving through the air like a gentle breeze. Thomas stood at the entrance, grateful for the camaraderie forged with Maria. Yet the shadow of Eric lingered, a reminder of the battles they had fought to get here. As the crowd began to gather around the centerpiece, a palpable shift in energy surged through Thomas. Witnessing people connect with the artwork, gazing into the vivid tales told in color and texture, filled him with warmth. It was more than just an art show. It was an invitation for everyone to peer into an experience they rarely associated with wealth. "Look!" Maria pointed discreetly at a couple captivated by her depiction of resilience. Thomas felt pride swelling within him. They had succeeded in creating the very connection they hoped to achieve. Then he saw Eric lurking at the edge of the crowd, his presence puncturing the bubble of joy that had enveloped them. Sweaty palms gripped Thomas's sides. The familiar fears re-emerged. What if Eric's dismissal crushed everything they had accomplished? But as he caught a glimpse of Maria, her focus unwavering, he found the strength to confront the adversities bred by silence and fear. With determination, he stepped forward, meeting Eric's smug eye. "What do you think?" he asked, letting the challenge linger in the air between them. "Art is subjective, Thomas," Eric replied, his condescension hardly masked. "Emotional outbursts don't qualify as masterpieces." "Then perhaps you should rethink what qualifies as value," Thomas retorted, steadiness grounding his voice. "This isn't just art. This is a narrative of existence. It resonates beyond either of our worlds, doesn't it?" Eric scoffed, but the growing interest of onlookers offered a new layer of reassurance. Thomas's heart raced as he turned to see several guests nodding, engaged by the stories behind the colors that Maria had bared for the world to see. "People are responding," Thomas said softly, turning back to Maria. The realization that they had transformed their individual stories into a collective triumph flowed through him. He had given himself at that moment the right to be seen, not merely as a billionaire, but as an individual worthy of articulating their truths. As the evening waned and guests drifted away, Maria took Thomas aside, her gaze piercing yet tender. "We did it, Thomas. You spoke truth to that facade. I felt the weight lift as we shared our art with the world. Not just art," he corrected, his voice measured. "We unveiled truths. The audience deserves this honesty, and so did we. I felt you growing through it all," she added.
You understood the connection that transcends privilege and hardship. That was a leap, one I didn't think you could take." In that moment, he knew he had not only bridged the distance with Maria, but had sparked reconciliation with Emma, who had come by to witness the event. The evening felt complete, each piece echoing the intricate dance of their journeys, connections forged across vulnerability. "Your story matters, Thomas," she whispered as he embraced her, no longer the quiet bystander to his own life, but its architect, fully equipped to navigate his emotions and challenge the narratives that confined him. That was his accomplishment. A journey that began in isolation had culminated in connection, both with himself and with those around him. Stepping away from the gallery, Thomas carried a sense of formidable confidence and well-earned fulfillment. He had become not just an advocate for Maria's art, but a proponent for authenticity, standing firmly with her at the forefront of their shared mission. For the first time in years, he truly felt whole, not just as a member of the elite, but as a contributor to humanity's narrative tapestry. He looked at the canvas once more as a testament, not just to their stories, but to the strength they had summoned together. Recognizing this profound transformation, he realized that this was merely the beginning. An ongoing commitment to authenticity awaited. And with that realization came an exhilarating sense of possibility. Now it's your turn to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach even more people. Comment your reactions and theories about this profound ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this resolution. You need to support the journey of personal transformation and the impact of authentic storytelling. Don't wait even one more second.